Can a Lonewolf Bard rock and roll their way through every act of Baldur's Gate 3 on Tactician difficulty? Well, it won't be easy. He'll meet groupies and haters alike, but it certainly will be interesting. Before we get into all that though, first, the rules. Rule number 1. No other party members that have their own detached portrait. Summons and temporary companions such as Sovereign Glut are A-OK. Number 2. No multiclassing. We're Bard and nothing but Bard, baby. Number 3. No using illithid powers whatsoever, since I want to show off just how wild we can get with our own power. Number 4. No respecking. We gotta plan out our build well, and any mistakes in that process, we're gonna stick with. Number 5. No barrelmancy. That includes chestmancy as well to block doorways and other such nonsense. Number 6. No saving in the middle of combat. We're gonna put ourselves to work for our victories. Number 7. No karmic dice. This is to make the combat more of an authentic D&D experience and get true RNG. And finally, number 8. No changing the difficulty at any point. This is a tactician run, after all. With that out of the way, on to character creation. We start off by choosing half-orc for our race, since they make the best rock stars, and the extra melee crits and survivability certainly doesn't hurt either, since a little further down the line, we'll end up as a College of Swords bard. Next up is the class. I let you all vote on which class you wanted to see for this video, and as the title of the video suggests, we ended up with Bard. For our starting cantrips, we go the Vicious Mockery and Friends, cause, you know, Bard. And for our starting spells, we end up with Thunderwave, Longstrider, Sleep, and Tasha's Hideous Laughter for a nice mix of damage, utility, and crowd control. And of course, our most important choice is our instrument, and we choose the core of any medieval band, the hand drum. Our background of choice is Charlatan, since the proficiencies it gives are just too good to pass up, and every musician has a sinister side, as you know. Since we're planning on being more at the forefront of the fight, we pump up dex, and our ability scores end up looking like this. Our bard also gets proficiency in sleight of hand, perception, deception, intimidation, performance, and persuasion. Screw jack of all trades, we're master of all. We make our character look beautiful with some flowing locks, an immaculately sculpted beard, and some gloomy eyeshadow to match his gorgeous face. Then we give our magnificent musician a name fitting his status and send Bartholomew on his way. Our misplaced minstrel awakens on the Nautiloid after a wild night out with one goal in mind: to get rid of the tadpole implanted in his head, because unbeknownst to his adoring fans, Bartholomew can't actually practice at all if someone else is listening. We start by trying to get off the Nautiloid, and along the way we meet our first groupie, Lae'zel, who is so overwhelmed by our stardom that she jumps off the nearest cliff, leaving us to clean up the remaining fight, which goes by easily enough. Deeper in the Nautiloid, we find the Helm, where we can use the controls to escape. Unfortunately, there's some fighting already going on, so we do our best to pick off the baddies for a bit of experience as we run along to the controls. Once done, we activate the tentacles, causing the ship to teleport and land softly and gently on a beach, and with that, our new tour of the Sword Coast begins. Shortly after landing on the beach, we find some intellect devourers hanging out in the crash site. We get the jump on them and manage to take out one of them right away, and the other one falls just a moment later. Continuing our search to find anything worth finding, we do stumble upon a free pile of XP in the form of a lone mind flayer just waiting to be stabbed. And a little down the bend, we find another adoring fan who really wants a high five from his favorite drummer, though he gets a little clingy afterwards, so we just leave him to his swirling abyss and go on our merry way. As we look for a safe place to hunker down, we find some wannabe Tomb Raiders hanging out discussing the differences in their height. We're kind enough to let them know that there's some bad juju coming out from the Nautiloid and they should really get going, and in so doing, we get a nat 20 on our very first roll. They get spooked and bounce, leaving behind enough experience to hit level 2. Level 2 grants us Song of Rest, which is essentially an extra short rest each long rest, Jack of all trades, which adds half our proficiency bonus rounded down to every ability check we're not already proficient with, and we get another spell learned in the form of Featherfall for a bit more utility along with another first level spell slot to go with it. Now that we're more powerful than ever, we get ready to trip and fall into a pit, whereupon we get discovered by the rest of the Tomb Raiders who are very ready to murder us, and do so in a matter of moments, giving us our first death in this series. But it was really super close, I swear, so we went back and tried again, and fine, okay, maybe it wasn't that close. Moving on. We continue looking elsewhere in the forest and stumble upon a group of goblins attacking a druid grove, and naturally, mainly because we were in the near vicinity and already spotted by the goblins, we decide to join the fight. As the fight breaks out, it's chaos on both sides, but Zevlor breaks out his own musical instrument and makes this fight a breeze. Bartholomew does his own bit of heroics here and there, but for the most part the baddies are cleaned up by the NPCs, and we are welcomed into the druid grove with open arms as the rock star we are. There's lots of talking to be done here in the grove, and tensions are high between the tieflings and druids, but we meet a fellow bard in the form of Volo, save a child from the worst character, and most importantly, meet everyone's favorite blacksmith, Damon. Damon always drives a hard bargain, but for now he sells us the first long-term staple of our build, the hunting shortbow. This +1 shortbow grants us advantage on all monstrosity enemies, as well as lets us cast Hunter's Mark once per long rest, for a bit of extra damage on every attack, which will be very good for us as we'll be attacking a ton. Once everything is all wrapped up in the druid grove, we go back to the tomb, but make sure to use a different entrance. Not because I'm scared or anything, it's just closer. Upon entering, we flip on turn-based mode and loot the sarcophagus for the key to let us deeper in, and as we get running from the traps, we slip yet again. Thankfully, this time we can just walk it off. Before we wake up Withers and his skeletons, we loot this dude's sword so he'll be stuck throwing rocks in combat. As the fight starts, we go first and run inside Withers' little hideaway for a safe spot to cast protection from evil and good since I forgot to beforehand. What should be a pretty easy fight goes south pretty fast when our concentration gets broken and we get pelted down by attacks one after another, resulting in another death. For round 2, we make sure to cast protection from evil and good beforehand, and we stealth to start the fight with a surprise round as well. We start poking them down as they all dash to get line of sight on us, and once it rolls back to our turn again, we take another pot shot and start to move into Withers' crib. Unfortunately, they go all vape-nash, fog clouding us on their turn, and break our concentration immediately after. Little do they know that this fog cloud is our new best friend. We run inside the room, heal up, cast protection from evil and good, and then just kinda chill because they refuse to move into their own fog cloud. They get whittled down bit by bit as we shoot them from our safety bubble, but eventually the cloud does just naturally wear out, though by this point we're in a much better spot. Then the enemies all dash inside in a nice big clump, so we blow them up with a thunder wave to weaken them, followed by a potion of speed and another thunder wave to return most of them to their eternal slumber. And the last one goes down just a second later. We then meet Withers, our number 1 stan, who follows us around and stares at us while we sleep. As we're gallivanting through the grassy greens, we meet the literal devil, Raphael, who offers to make a deal with us, which is how you know we've really made it as a rock star. Unfortunately, when we accept the deal, he just acts like a bad date and tells us we're not desperate enough. Then we at last make our way to the blighted village, which is overrun by goblins who evidently aren't acquainted with our music as they threaten to murk us, but we throw our weight around and they leave us alone afterwards. This little conversation bumps us up to level 3, and with it we get our subclass, the College of Swords. This subclass grants us the ability to finally use our bardic inspiration dice in the form of flourishes, which gives our attacks a variety of effects, from boosting our AC, attacking multiple times with one action, and even shoving enemies. We also gain proficiency with scimitars and medium armor, expertise with deception and persuasion, a new fighting style for which we choose 2-weapon fighting, and a new spell learned, Cloud of Daggers, which is such a good spell, alongside 2 level 2 spell slots. Once we're inside the village proper, we meet some more goblins, but this time they're torturing a possible mixtape recipient, so we get heated and tell them to clear off, before rescuing our newest fan. Nothing like the power of music to bring a community together. We continue on to the goblin camp after, but man, I could swear we're forgetting something. Oh well. Along the way we come across these bozos who we convince that their leader summoned us, and their response is to make us cover our faces with warg dung, which is certainly an approach to welcoming your boss's guest. Naturally, there's only one appropriate way forward for Bartholomew. With a fight breaking out, on our first turn we shoot their war drum with a defensive flourish to boost our AC and prevent reinforcements, before hunters marking one of their wargs and running for cover. Most of the enemies waste their turns dashing to get us, except this guy who summons yet another warg, so he's gotta go first. Before we can get him, he runs up to high ground and lands a brutal shot, breaking our concentration before he gets got for good on our turn. A couple enemies follow us up onto the high ground and start swinging away on us, while most of the others just stand about, unable to reach us even with ranged attacks. Thankfully, a group of enemies on high ground means prime thunder-waving material, and one of them gets sent flying to their doom while we sprinkle in the odd healing pot to stay in tip-top shape. It's not much later that the other one falls to the old 1-2, and the rest of the fight goes easy enough. I mean, what's the worst that can happen, right? Oh, okay. Thank God we're a half-orc. And a half-orc that's a wizard with a bow at that. We take out both with one shot thanks to Slashing Flourish letting us target 2 enemies, and the wargs just growl at us as they get pelted with arrows till the fight is over. All in a day's work. Unfortunately, before we can make it into the camp, we're beset upon by yet another starstruck groupie who says something about our life being in danger unless we take her with us. I don't know, man. She's a little clingy, so we tell her to bugger off. Once that's out of the way, we finally arrive at the goblin camp and there's a party going on. But before we can get to partying, we talk to Priestess Gut, who goes to her room since she wants to talk to us in private about mayhaps getting rid of our unwanted mental voyeur. With her out of the way, it's time to get wild. We get a little tipsy, free our pal Volo, who's found himself imprisoned here, and he very ominously says he can't wait to pick our brain. Then we find out Bartholomew is secretly hot, and join a weird masochism cult, which grants us Leviatar's love as a permanent boon. Normally this lasts until we die, but if we die, we have to reload anyways, so this is extra permanent for us. And it wouldn't be a rockstar's night out if we didn't also get an ill-advised tattoo. The partying jogs our memory, and we head back to the village to go recruit some ogres into fighting for us in the future. Thankfully, they're super into our new tat, which makes not being eaten easier, and we're able to convince them to join us in the future when we, blow their bone horn. Before we can get around to destroying the establishment of the cult, we want to make a quick pit stop down to the Underdark, and to do that, we've got to make our way past some creepy crawlies. We deal with the first group easily enough, but Mama Spider and her children are a different story. Even though we take care of the queen with a well-placed void bulb, the little fellas make short work of us. Round 2 goes much worse because we don't make short work of Mama this time, and she pulls the old Uno reverse on us. Third time is the charm, as they say. Another successful void bulb knocks the Spider Queen into the pit for an insta-kill, and even though things get a bit touch and go, we get a well-placed Thunder Wave to finish off the 2 little ones. As we settle down for the evening, Volo meets us at our camp and lets us know he can probably just stab the Mind Flayer parasite out of our skull. We think that sounds pretty metal, so we give it a go. Unfortunately, we do end up losing just a bit of our eyeballs, but we end up with a cool replacement one that gives us the ability to see invisible things, and Volo takes a bow and heads off to Act 3. Feeling nice and rested, we plunge into the depths of the Underdark and make our way to the Myconid colony, where we meet everyone's favorite ring-selling shopkeep, Dareth, who sells us the Caustic Band, another long-term staple of our build that grants us a nice +2 acid damage on every attack. Simple, but who could ask for more? With a power-up in hand, we go back to the party at the Goblin camp and meet up with Gut, who offers us a drink, and I mean, how can we refuse? It's a party. Unfortunately, our tolerance ain't what it used to be, and Bartholomew goes down for the count. As it turns out, Gut is a huge fan and tries to keep us captive. We do our best to break out, but it just doesn't work out. Thankfully, an even crazier groupie of ours shows up just in the nick of time to deal with her and set us free. And just as Bartholomew planned, no less. That's leader number 1 down. Our next victim of choice is Minthara. We try the old luring her to a ledge and blasting her off with Thunder Wave trick, which she really doesn't like. So we just go with plan B, property damage. We wait for her to walk over to this shabby bridge and shoot it out from under her, causing her to do a goofy little Scooby-Doo fall to her death, and that's leader number 2 dealt with. But we had an eyewitness right here, and we brace ourselves for a fight as they call us out on breaking the bridge? Seriously? You care more about the bridge? Good lord, this is Amazon levels of not caring about your workers. Well, moving on. Last but not least is the world's worst spellcaster, Dror Ragzlin. We try the Thunderwave trick on him too, but he just really isn't impressed, and is quite vocal about his distaste. This fight is a tricky one for sure, but like all problems, it can be solved with a song. We play a little jig to lure everyone in the room over to this pit, blow up another bridge which really pisses everyone off, down an elixir of bloodlust, and get the thunderwave of a lifetime, taking out Mr. Ragzlin and most of his goons in one fell swoop. The fight, as you can imagine, ends mere moments later. With the Goblin camp all cleared out, we go back to the Underdark to track down the Adamantine Forge, which unfortunately requires taking a boat that's heavily guarded by some Dwergar. We convince them we mean no harm before just walking down to their boat and setting sail to Grimforge right under their noses. And this place is so pumped to see us touring here that it gives us enough experience to reach level 4 just for showing up. With this level up, we get Light as another cantrip to help prepare us for the next act, where it will be very handy. another spell in the form of Hold Person to help us with some single target situations down the line, alongside another second level spell slot. We also get our first feat and decide to roll with a +2 to our dex from an ability score improvement, putting it up to 19, boosting our ability to deal damage as well as avoid damage. Bartholomew isn't quite ready to face everything going on here just yet, so we head back to the surface to get some power boosts. Our first boost comes in the form of the best boy Scratch, a huge morale boost and an absolute necessity for this build. We can't get through the game without him. For our next major power-up, we have to head deep inside the monastery past the Risen Road and into the Githyanki Creche. Naturally, we take the scenic route to get there. Once we arrive at the monastery proper, to get inside we have to fight our way through a veritable mosh pit of drunk kobolds. We do get the surprise round on them, which gives us time to prep a cloud of daggers right in the doorway, and they just shred themselves running through it. This fight doesn't press us too much, and before you know it, it's just Bartholomew and a pile of corpses, as any good mosh pit ends. After that, it's just a matter of walking down some stairs, and we get greeted by some Gith once inside, who after a bit of persuasion let us meander about freely, which means we get to talk to the true Gith waifu, a Jacques Nirjira. She sells us our next power-up, the Knife of the Undermountain King. This +2 short sword reduces our crit threshold by 1. And when we roll 2 damage or less on any damage die, we get to reroll the die and take the higher result. It also gives us advantage on attacks against obscure targets, but this is currently bugged and it isn't working properly. Either way, an insanely good item, and I can't believe you can just buy it for cheap. Now that we're better equipped, we go back to Grimforge to deal with the Absolute cultists and their Dwergar workers. Our first attempt goes south pretty quickly, but Bartholomew's always got a backup plan. This time, the backup plan is to encourage the working class to rise up against the authoritarian regime that keeps the common Dwergar down in the mud. And all it takes is blowing up one scrying eye. Once done, we free the leader of the cultist who's been trapped behind some boulders, and then the fight breaks out and all our groupies rally to our side. It's a pretty chaotic fight as allies go down left and right, but so too do the enemies. With this many allies on our side though, this fight is mostly just about keeping ourselves alive, which only gets scary when we get disarmed, dropping both of our melee weapons on the ground. Thankfully, we can deal with this lone Dwergar bothering us quickly with our bow. After a few very long rounds of combat, the last enemy goon falls and it's just near the leader left, but with this many groupies on our side, can't put up much of a fight before he too gets dealt with. But we learn the hard way that the regime never changes, no matter who's in charge, and right after the fight, we get accused of stealing our own scimitar that we picked up off the ground. We try and bribe the guard accusing us, but they would rather have our blood than our gold, so we show them what for since no one else is watching. When all is said and done, we end up with enough experience to hit level 5, granting a nice power spike by increasing our proficiency bonus to +3, bumping our inspiration dice up to d8s instead of d6s, and letting us recover them on long or short rests. And we get a new spell, Plant Growth, for even more AoE crowd control, and we swap out Sleep for Stinking Cloud to double up on that. We also get 2 level 3 spell slots to go alongside our brand new spells. We set about grabbing the materials needed to make our adamantine gear in the forge, and our first mold needed, the scale mail mold, is being guarded by a few sets of animated armor who pick a fight with us when we approach. These guys are tough cookies, but they only have a +1 to their con saves, so on our first turn we go in for a thunderwave to try and knock 2 of them into the lava below. Unfortunately, they both make the save, so we settle for a quick bonus action flourish. Most of them miss on their turns, but one of them gets a brutal crit, taking us down to half HP. We're determined to make Thunderwave work though, and with a well-angled position we manage to knock one of them into the lava below, and we down a health pot to almost full heal right after. The antagonistic armors spend their turns missing us, and when it comes back to us we manage to Thunderwave 2 more onto the low ground, which doesn't kill them, but it makes the rest of the fight way easier. Especially once we give their remaining friend the old razzle-dazzle with a mobile flourish off the cliff. After that, it's just a matter of picking the remaining 2 off one by one. We make sure to grab the mithril ore they were guarding just behind them as well, since we'll be needing that in just a bit. Unfortunately, it's time for the hardest fight in the entirety of Act 1, the Magma Mephit fight. Since we know what's coming, we do our best to plop down a cloud of daggers, though I misremember where they spawn and none of them jump into it. Not that it really matters, since our concentration gets broken by an instant heat metal, which also causes us to drop both of our swords. After surviving the atrocious surprise round, we go for a big ol' thunder wave, which somehow results in a net positive of Magma Mephits in this fight, because this fight was designed to spite me. We do our best to run away, but it doesn't really matter since they can fly and catch up to us regardless. On our turn we go for another thunder wave, which almost kills poor Bartholomew as the Mephits blow up on him, so we try and misty step to safety. Unfortunately, they get us good with a heat metal for some fun, unavoidable damage to kill us. Attempt 2 starts off with a similar lack of care from the Mephits, as this time they disregard our stinking cloud and instantly break our concentration. Likewise, it ends with another extra hot heat metal just for us. Before round 3, we juice up with an elixir of bloodlust to tilt the action economy a bit more in our favor, and we plant a cloud of daggers where we know at least one of them spawns. But when the fight starts, our concentration gets broken once again on the first possible hit of the surprise round. They land a bunch of blows and take us decently low, but when it gets back to us, we get a killer thunder wave, followed up by another banger. Thankfully, the other Mephits that spawn halfway into the fight have to wait around before they can get a turn, and we're able to take out 2 more with a slashing flourish. And on our next turn, we're able to finish off the final 2 with yet another ranged slashing flourish. God, that felt good. I know I do a good job at repressing it, but if you believe it, I do not like these Mephits. We grab our mithril ore as a reward and move on, though we decide to go beat up an old lady before taking out Grim as a break from this lava-filled hellscape. To prepare ourselves, we use a spell scroll found earlier to summon this little fella who goes by the name Shovel. Shovel is our new #1 groupie and has the pretty cool ability to turn invisible, so he's going to be following us around for a little bit. Then we continue down the road where we find the old lady in question being berated by 2 young men. You may ask yourselves what this poor old woman did to deserve such treatment, but I'm sure it becomes clear when I tell you that she is a Bartholomew hater. She actively burns our albums when she comes across them. Anyone so malignant has gotta go. We travel to her little tea house in the swamp and find that she has tricked the younger sister of those young men into also being a Bartholomew hater. To break her out of the spell, we tell her the truth that Ethel killed her brothers. In response, Ethel drops her disguise of the surrounding area and herself, turning the swamp into a, swamp, but evil, and also summons a few redcaps to come beat us up, which they do quite handedly. Next time goes a lot better though, because only 2 decide to show up for the fight at the beginning. Eventually the other 2 do show up, but they're so far away that by the time they get here, we've already managed to pick off the first 2. The other 2 that show up are mages, and they get a scary hold person off on us, which is normally quite deadly when you've just got one character, but Shovel is here to save the day, taking out one of them, and the other one goes down just a second later. We go into Ethel's basement to track her down, and along the way beat up the mindless drones who desperately try and resist the enforced Bartholomew hate. And now that we're down at the bottom where Mayrina is being imprisoned, we down an invisibility pot, pull the switch to free her, and thanks to Volo's eye, spot the invisible Ethel. We start off the fight with a ranged flourish double shot right into her, and then proceed to get hit by every single ray of sickness, and instantly die before we get a turn. So it might be good to go in a bit more prepared. We cast Protection from Evil and Good to give her disadvantage on her attacks against us, down an elixir of poison resistance so that if she does hit, she does half damage, and to top it off, we also coat our bow in drow poison to knock her unconscious if she fails a save. Round 2 kicks off with a huge crit with our slashing flourish, and even though Ethel looks like she's ready to throw hands, she is in fact secretly sleeping. So we get another colossal hit off on her before she summons all her clones. Due to our earlier prep work, we're able to survive the onslaught of attacks, and with one more attack, we knock her below 30 HP. And even though she's asleep, she wakes up just to surrender. She offers to give us a +1 to any ability score of our choice if we let her keep Mayrina, but we tell her all of our fans are ready to attack her unless she gives us both, and she believes us. I mean, who wouldn't? And for our bonus, we take the +1 to dexterity to go up to a 20 total and a +5 modifier, capping us out already at level 5. With all that done, we're feeling ready to take on Grim. We head back to the forge, pop in the mold and the ore, pull the lever to lower the platform and spin the lava valve. And who should come popping out but the big man himself, the head honcho of the Grim Forge. It's boss fight time, Bartholomew and Shovel versus Grim, and this is a doozy of a fight. Grim is immune to most types of damage unless he gets superheated in the magma, at which point the big fella's got vulnerability to bludgeoning. So we start off by moving the invisible Shovel next to the hammer lever so he's at the ready. Then we, with a potion of glorious vaulting that we took earlier, hop over to lure the construct to the center. It works all according to plan, and we get a colossal hit off on Grim by slamming the hammer for 156 points of damage, which attracts the attention of magma Mephits. We blow Lump's Bonehorn to even out the tides with our own groupies and get to making some evasive maneuvers while we wait for Grim to get superheated again. The ogres get to work dealing absolutely 0 damage to Grim while cooking themselves alive, which is always fun, though Lump does take out one Mephit. A few turns later and Grim shows another Magma Mephit what for, and things are looking pretty good. Unfortunately, Grim isn't falling for our tricks and refuses to walk under the hammer again, but does start chipping away at us with this huge AoE stomp. Eventually we get another hit off with the hammer for another huge bit of damage, but it all goes to heck when he lands a wombo combo that kills both Shovel and Lump, and triggers our half-orc feature. We do our best to lure the boss back to the center, but we get got with another stomp to finish attempt 1. Attempt 2, unfortunately, goes much the same way. But you know what they say, third time is the... okay, it's gonna be like that, huh? Round 4 kicks off and we do the old jump into the center to lure Grim over trick before Shovel pulls the lever to give the construct a rough wake-up call. As the big guy's writhing on the floor, we blow Lump's bone horn yet again to add some more distractions to the fight since we're very scared of this boss. And they certainly keep him occupied, but it's not really helping our game plan since he just wanders off. Like, really wanders off. Where is he going? Well, that felt a little pointless, but there goes all the ogres. Now that they're all dealt with, Grim finally makes his way back to the center of the arena, and we're able to get another hammer fall off, which conjures up the Magma Mephit straight from the pits of hell. So we down an Elixir Bloodlust to take them out without losing our flow too much. Back on our turn, we use 2 slashing flourishes to take out all but one of the Magma Mephits. Grim takes this personally and beats the ever-loving life out of us, putting us into quite the pickle since now we need to deal with the Mephit. Otherwise, we will guaranteed die to the heat metal. And we also need to heal up to survive Grim's stomp, and preferably also lure Grim to the center of the arena. It's a lot to do, but we start by thunderwaving the Magma Mephit and pray it gets knocked away so its corpse exploding doesn't kill us. Then we misty step to the far side of the arena using Nier's boots, followed by throwing a potion of healing at our feet to top us up. It all works out perfectly when Grim stops right on the center of the hammer and we get a long-range shot on the lever and we finally finish off the fight. Unfortunately, Shovel did not survive the fight. RIP Shovel. Our rewards for this fight are the Adamantine Scale Mail and Adamantine Scimitar, both of which will be replaced pretty quickly in Act 2. But for now, the Scale Mail is 16 AC medium armor that caps our dex bonus at +3, reduces all damage we take by 1, gives us disadvantage on stealth, crit immunity, and when we get hit by a melee attack, our attacker gets sent reeling for 2 turns, which reduces their chance to hit us. And for all intents and purposes, the Scimitar is just a +1 Scimitar, for our uses at least. Since we're all kitted up, we've got one last thing left to do in Act 1. Time to take out the leader of the Gith in the monastery. We head back to the creche and negotiate passage to where the Inquisitor and his cronies are hanging out, and it's here we meet Vlaakith, the Ultra Hater, a false god who demands worship from everyone. She asks us to go into the artifact and kill our dream visitor, but I mean, who could hurt such a pretty face? So instead, as we leave the artifact, a fight breaks out, and this is an insanely difficult one. We've got 5 highly mobile Gith that can all jump around the arena like crazy. Their leader can use his Mind Steal Link ability to reduce RAC and grant us vulnerability to psychic damage, which is extra bad since all the others deal bonus psychic on every attack. Not to mention the 2 mage-esque ones that deal boatloads of psychic damage out the wazoo, and to top it off, the marshals can use a reaction to reduce the damage of any physical attack we land. All in all, a real nightmare, and even though we were able to bring them down to just 2 enemies left pretty often, we still died over and over. Until eventually I decided to stop bashing poor Bartholomew's head against a wall and come up with a new plan. We know our hero is already a master of so many different things, but what if he were to become a Pokemon master as well? We catch wind that someone is transporting a Master Ball through the Risen Road, so we make a quick pit stop and sneak past all the chaos going on around it to yoink that bad boy. Before going into the Inquisitor fight, we juice up by dipping our weapons in poison. We've also got our Bloodlust elixir still going from the Grim fight, and a permanent bless coming from somewhere. Honestly, I have no clue. And for certainty's sake, we use a scroll of blur on ourselves to give enemies disadvantage on attacks. The fight starts and we use a ranged slashing flourish to almost kill one of the mages before downing a speed pot to do another slashing flourish, finishing them off and injuring another, which grants us yet another action for a third flourish to finish off the other one. One of them lands a good couple pot shots on us, which breaks our concentration, and when it gets back to us, we heal up, before running away and using our last bardic inspiration to finish off the guy that broke our concentration. With 2 enemies left, we use another action to throw our Pokeball and summon a spectator right in their midst. Since we've got our boy pulling aggro, we're able to cast Cloud of Daggers to deal some AoE, and the fight kinda splits from here, with one enemy going after us and the Inquisitor going after the spectator. As it turns out though, our Pokemon is quite the homie, and when it sees us in danger, finishes off the opponent we were fighting, leaving just the Inquisitor left. We do our best to land pot shots, but it's kinda just a waste of time. I honestly probably should have just been spamming Cloud of Daggers. The Inquisitor takes out the Spectator soon after, and now it's just us and him left, and we are feeling the pressure. It gets very close when he brings us down to 1 HP, but we use a cloud of daggers to bring him nice and low, and at the start of his turn, it shreds him to dust. Ooh-wee, not even close, baby. Now that this place is all clear, we finally get our reward, the Strange Conduit Ring. This little fella is one of my favorite rings in general, granting us an extra 1d4 psychic damage on weapon attacks so long as we're concentrating on a spell. And ideally, we'll always be concentrating on a spell. Well worth the suffering if you ask me. And just like that, Act 1 is dealt with. Bartholomew's next stop in his tour of the Sword Coast is the Shadow-Cursed Lands, so we head off to Grimforge and leave to exit Act 1 there. Our musical maestro enters the Shadow-Cursed Lands at last, and before we go any further, we make sure our light cantrip is active since the darkness in this place will damage us if we don't have a light source. And now that we're a bit more prepared, we wander towards the direction of what could possibly be conceived as a path where we come across some harpers wandering through the darkness, who upon seeing us are so starstruck that they just stare at us like a Kingdom Hearts character for 20 uninterrupted seconds. Seriously, I timed it. Before one of them gets sent off into the darkness to go get ambushed, and just like that, our first fight breaks out. This fight does not go off to a good start, with all three shadows that go before us lunging at us and landing quite a few blows, one of which is a strength drain, which as the name suggests, lowers our strength by 3, causing us to become encumbered, and if it gets to 0, we instantly die. Although our HP is the more pressing matter. After sending a bunch of equipment back to the camp to become unencumbered, we use Misty Step to teleport to the middle of our gang, hoping these folks won't mind dying for us, and we heal up by throwing a potion at our feet as well. The round passes by pretty uneventfully, and we get the opportunity on our next turn to introduce the shadows to our favorite hit single, Cloud of Daggers, to start shredding away at them. Unfortunately, the first one that goes out of the group manages to break our concentration, so the other two can escape safely, and one of the harpers falls a moment later. When it gets back to Bartholomew, things are feeling decently dire, so we use a defensive flourish to finish off one of the shadows and boost our AC, before healing ourselves up some more thanks to our Bloodlust elixir. Another round goes by with all the NPCs beating each other up, and we manage to get an opportunity attack to finish off the undead harper. On our turn, we use a couple slashing flourishes to take out some more of the shadows, one after another, and things are looking much better. Though another one of our harper allies dies a moment later. We then use Hunter's Mark on one shadow and a slashing flourish to hit the other two, since concentrating on a spell increases our damage thanks to our strange conduit ring. But unfortunately it's not enough, and both shadows live with a sliver of HP, so we run behind our harper pal. And just like that, another one bites the dust a moment later. Thankfully, we managed to get a shot off on one of the shadows, which finishes it off, and triggers the Elixir of Bloodlust into a cloud of daggers on the remaining two, which gets rid of one right away, and gets the next one right as it starts its turn. Honestly, a way scarier fight than it had any right to be, and if it weren't for the groupies and all the buffs we had carry over from the last act, we definitely would have got. A scary precedent to start off Act 2, to say the least. With that out of the way, we carry on to the last light in, where we meet the rest of the harpers who feel very murdery towards us. But thankfully, one of our fans speaks up on our behalf and tells Jaheira, the leader here, that it would be a crime to stop our tour. She acquiesces, and we get free roam of the inn's grounds, where we get a bunch of power-ups. Our first two are found from Quartermaster Tally, the Cloak of Protection and the Yuan Ti Scale Mail. The Cloak of Protection grants us +1 to our armor class and saving throws. Not the most interesting effect, but boy is it good. And the Yuan Ti Scale Mail is medium armor with a base AC of 15, and it allows us to add our full dexterity modifier, which basically makes it 20 AC. And to boot, it also gives us a +1 to our initiative rolls, all around a solid upgrade. Then we meander our way to the best shopkeep, Damon, in order to turn in some infernal iron, so he can make us some flawed Helldusk gloves, and so we can buy the Thorn Blade from him. The flawed Helldusk gloves, for all intents and purposes, grant us an extra 1d4 fire damage and a +1 to our strength saving throws as well, for another nice boost to our damage. Well, the Thorn Blade is a +1 scimitar that lets us cast Ensnaring Strike once per long rest, and more importantly, when concentrating on a spell, we grant an extra 1d4 poison damage to all our melee attacks, for yet another boost to our damage. Needless to say, this was quite the good shopping trip for us. Before we leave the inn, we have a quick chat with Jaheira, who mentions they want us to go infiltrate the enemy HQ and see what's up, and before we go, we should chat with Isabel upstairs, who's safe and secure, and nothing bad will happen if we go talk to her. Either way, we put that off for later. Now that we're all kitted up, we start heading out of the inn, and as it turns out, one of our fans has set up an ambush on some cult members who keep interfering with our work. So we follow them to the ambush site and get in position. Whereupon we meet a Drider with a special lantern that keeps the shadow curse at bay, leading a pack of cultists. And just because we convince the Drider to give us the lantern, which he isn't too happy about because it means he'll die terribly. And then we launch the ambush anyways, so we can test out our new and improved gear. The fight kicks off and we fire a wicked slashing flourish, taking out one of the goons and seriously messing up another. Then we go down and whack another dude with our bonus action for an offhand swing. One of our buddies gets a nice firebolt to finish off the cultist we weakened as well. Though the enemies ain't just sitting by. The one we were fighting rages and reckless attacks and gets a nasty crit hit off on us, taking out a bunch of our HP, and the Drider also gets a crit to kill one of our allies before jumping to us. Seeing that we're a bit surrounded, we misty step up to the roof and fire down another slashing flourish to kill one of the dudes and soften up another just enough for everyone's favorite firebolt casting homie to finish him off. When it gets back to us, we cast a cloud of daggers on both the barbarian crony and the Drider to continue damaging them, but they both run out soon after, and before you know it, the Drider is right on top of us. Bartholomew goes for the Thunderwave to try and fling the arachnid adversary off the edge, but unfortunately he makes the save. This lady does manage to shove him though, which is honestly kind of incredible. And then she dies terribly, but still impressive. Really wanting to get this Drider away from us, we go for a mobile flourish in the hopes it knocks him off the roof, but he's a stubborn old fellow and refuses to go anywhere. He does in return get a mean multi-attack on us, dealing a ton of damage and breaking our concentration, which as you remember means we do much less damage on our attacks as well. We go for the Hail Mary mobile flourish, which unfortunately misses, and a moment later our last remaining groupie goes down to the barbarian, which really puts us in a tight spot. Another signature cloud of daggers gets upcasted to a level 3 spell slot on Bartholomew's turn, and this is enough to finish off the barbarian and deal some hefty damage to the Drider, who unleashes a multi-attack which thankfully all misses. Then we miss yet another mobile flourish and get whacked with a crit on top of another blow, which brings us down to a measly 2 HP. And right when all seems lost, the mobile flourish finally lands with a crit of our own and sends the Drider flying down, taking, good lord, 71 points of fallen damage. This guy's gotta go on a diet. But the fight's not done yet, though it's nothing an upcasted cloud of daggers can't fix. See you later, nerd. Oh, all in a day's work, you know? Oh my god, what? Okay, oh my god, fight's not over. What do we do? Let's go with another mobile flourish, which thankfully hits now that the Drider has way less AC since it's undead, dealing another big chunk of damage. It then spends its turn running into our cloud of daggers, where it promptly dies, hopefully for good, at the start of its turn. Good lord. Now that our heart attack is over, we set about looting the moon lantern, which is running on a living pixie who we set free, and she is such a big Bartholomew fan that she grants us a bell that protects us from the shadow curse. A moment later, we meander across the bridge towards Moonrise Towers and we hit level 6. Level 6 grants us a pretty hefty power spike. We get Counter Charm, which is a pretty lackluster ability that grants us advantage on charmed and frightened effects for a few turns at the cost of an action. And more importantly, we get extra attack as a subclass feature, granting us an additional attack each time we take the attack action, doubling our weapon-based damage output. To top it off, we get another spell learned, Shatter, alongside a new 3rd level spell slot, and we also replace Featherfall for Knock, since we have Featherfall scrolls and potions, and Knock is a nice occasional utility spell. Before we head to Moonrise, we want to make our way to the Masons Guild, and as we're in the middle of heading there, we get jumped by a bunch of hooligans hanging out in the town square. This really isn't the most interesting fight as they're all pretty generic goons, but that makes it all the more embarrassing when we eventually get our butts kicked by them, granting us our first death in this act. Yikes. Next time though, we just sneak around and arrive at the Masons Guild basement, no problem. Once inside, we get into another rather uninteresting fight with some resident shadows. This really isn't the most challenging fight either, so it's nothing a few good sword swings can't fix. Our reward for our troubles is the Helmet of Arcane Acuity, yet another insane item power-up for our build. This helmet makes it so whenever we deal damage with any weapon, we get 2 turns of Arcane Acuity, capped out at 7, and for each turn remaining, we have a +1 to our spell attack rolls and spell save DCs, which means if we stay on top of this, we basically just got a +7 to both, which is just so absolutely insane. And as a treat, it also gives +1 to dexterity saves. This little fella's sticking with us for a while. Now that we're all juiced up, we feel more comfortable heading into Moonrise Towers, where we meet Ketheric Thorm, the head honcho around these parts, who seems to be just a wee bit immortal, which might be a problem. Thankfully, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, he doesn't seem to recognize us, and so we managed to infiltrate without being spotted, even if it is hard not to proclaim to the world who we are. After all that drama in the center room, we head upstairs and meet Zarel, and she begins to suspect us, so we distract her with our natural charm, which works like a charm. She also lets us know that Balthazar, a lead member of Kethric's merry band, is on some super secret mission in the mausoleum to the north and needs some help. With that, we've got a goal in mind, but before we get around to heading there, we've got some side questing to do. First on our list of side quests is talking to the master of the Toll House, Garen Goth Thorm, who really hopes we've got a new album for her. Unfortunately, she seems to want our record to go gold before she'll let us pass. We do our best to confuse her with a lie, but she sees right through it and a fight breaks out. As it turns out, she does more damage the more gold we have, and we find that one out the hard way, dying in a matter of moments thanks to our success. After doing our best DJ Khaled impression, we start attempt 2 in much the same way since I forgot to put the gold away beforehand. So we take a quick break to do some inventory management, cause who doesn't like doing that in the middle of fights? We heal up a bit and fire a few shots off at one of the visages that act as Jerry's goons. We manage to take it out, and when we do, the big G also loses a ton of HP, which means if we take out just the little guys, the big guy goes down too. On our next turn, we misty step to the roof and heal up using our potions so we don't insta-die to the next hit. The enemies get their turns, and all the visages have this little AoE that does guaranteed damage, which chips us down quite a bit, especially when Garen Goth Thorm comes in with a big hit too. Feeling a little overwhelmed, we down a potion of invisibility and scamper into the darkness. In a cool way, though. And the enemies quickly lose track of us, which breaks initiative. Bartholomew starts the fight back up with a cloud of daggers in a spot that will hopefully hit a bunch of the little guys, but Jerry doesn't take too kindly to that. Our turn is next, though, and we use a couple of slashing flourishes to weaken enemies for our cloud of daggers to take them out, which it does do for one of them since they're all surprised and just standing in place. Then we drop the banger of a lifetime by thunderwaving the big boss off our roof, dealing a truly absurd amount of damage and taking her out of the fight for the foreseeable future. After that, it's just down to picking off the remaining visages, which go down without a contest one by one. And then we end it with a 6-shot through the roof on Garen Goth herself, granting us a bunch of XP and a bajillion gold. As an extra reward, we make a quick little pit stop in the center of town to get us some revenge on those hooligans from earlier, and it goes way better this time. We don't even die a little bit. Side quest numero 2 has us going to the House of Healing where we find yet another Thorm, this time going by the name Malice. Dr. Malice, really? Anyways, Dr. Malice is demonstrating on a living person how to use a scalpel to all the nurses who he's teaching, which is, I don't know if I'm allowed to show this. Naturally, he's a bit much for Bartholomew, and seeing as how the last Thorm was very murdery, we decided to get ahead of it this time by convincing him to get under the scalpel, to which he is surprisingly receptive. Oh, I get the feeling our hero's next album is gonna be a little messed up. To wash away the woes and dark thoughts, we head to the local tavern where we meet Thisbald Thorm. These guys are everywhere, who pours us a drink and offers a toast. Now, I like the occasional drink as much as the next guy, but this is a little much. We do our best to fake drinking it, but the bartender catches us in the act, and our rock star gets into a good old-fashioned bar fight. Much to our chagrin, Thisbald is immune to all physical damage, and he has a boatload of HP. The only way to remove his immunities is to deal elemental damage to him and get him to throw up on you for a ton of damage. Not ideal. So a plan starts to form. We make sure he keeps his distance while we deal with all the other bar patrons and start heading outside. Once that's done, a misty step onto the roof takes us to relative safety, assuming our positioning isn't terrible, and Phase 2 begins. Phase 2 consists of dropping a gnarly cloud kill using a scroll on the bloated bartender, and then spending years repositioning and moving it on top of him every turn to very, very, very slowly whittle him down. He does vomit on us through the floor at one point, which is kinda baloney if you ask me, but it does mean if he does that one more time, he'll black out for a turn. Either way, we keep up the cloud kill plan. Until eventually, when he gets decently low, we intentionally move to the edge to get within vomiting range where he does just as we hope and knocks himself out, leaving us an opportunity to continue our extermination of the Thorm family line. Since getting drunk didn't work out, we settle for moving on with our lives and heading to the mausoleum, where we encounter the literal devil who still refuses to make a deal with us, but does warn us about another devil lurking inside. Mayhaps if we kill said devil, Raphael will finally make a deal with us and will become famous. Even more famous. So we eagerly jaunt inside. Once in the Thor mausoleum, we solve a puzzle real quick, head down an elevator, and solve another puzzle. Then we take a side passageway leading us to a cloaker, who lets us take out half its HP before it actually decides maybe it doesn't want to get put down without a fight, but by then it's too late. When we get inside the next room, we meet some undead being puppeted by Balthazar, who's a bit of a potty mouth, but understandably so since we're getting ambushed by Char's groupies. This fight's got a bit of a gimmick, with these umbral tremors spawning enemies each round unless we take them out, but since we took the side passageway, there's some more of Balthazar's goons that reinforce us from the main hall. Even though we do a decent job of taking out the umbral tremors at first, it very quickly gets out of control for us, and the enemies eventually get the best of us. So this time we prep with a protection from evil and good to make things a bit trickier for them. On our first turn we get rid of one of the umbral tremors, then down an elixir of bloodlust with the goal of taking out as many as possible on this turn. Then another slashing flourish to take out 2 more, and we learn the hard way that they count as objects and as such don't trigger elixir of bloodlust. But honestly, this fight is a bit of a wash. We take out tremor after tremor before most of them can spawn any enemies, and we actually end the fight with some skelegoons still remaining on our side. When the fight ends, we're immediately greeted by Flesh, Balthazar's baby brother, as well as Balthazar himself, who we convince to lend flesh to us for the rest of the dungeon. As we explore some more, we also find Least Expected, a +2 short bow with the ability to fire a blinding shot, and this bad boy is a surprise tool that will help us later, so keep it in mind. More importantly, we find a kitty, who we follow to a big old pile of bones, and it's here we meet Yurgir, the devil Raphael warned us about, and sure as shoot, Yurgir can smell Raphael on us too. Thankfully, this man recognizes stardom and, wanting to impress us, belts out his own song he's working on. But it's definitely not the best. We tell him the only way he's coming back from that is if he kills everyone who heard it and starts fresh, so he gets rid of his cronies, and unfortunately Nessa too. We try our best to convince him to take himself out since his singing is an affront to the concept of music and we want to impress Rafi, but he doesn't buy that one and a fight breaks out. And he starts off by landing a couple of hits on us, one of which is a crit, and then just turning invisible. So on our turn, we steal a play from his book and go invisible ourselves with a potion. A couple turns later, we spot him thanks to the invisible seeing eye we have, and break our invisibility with a pair of slashing flourishes, dealing some chunky damage. Bartholomew slices and dices in melee now that we're healed up a bit thanks to potions, but Yurgir quickly makes us regret that with some heavy hits fired in return, proccing our half-orc feature and dropping us to 1 HP. The emergency sirens are going off, so we ring the bell to summon Flesh, which we really should have done earlier, and Misty step out of dodge before firing up the healing potion Yeetin machine. Yurgir does some hijinks on his turn and goes invisible, so on our turn, in order to find him, we do this neat little trick where you can use your movement line in order to find a spot you can't move to, and that's where the invisible fella is. You still have to actually hit him though. Flesh and our diabolic detractor keep duking it out and we keep missing, so eventually we decide to just whip out old Reliable to guaranteed hit him. And oh my god, I guess our words did get through to Yurgir. Well, with that dealt with, we grab the Umbral Gem he was protecting and move on. To get the other 3 Umbral Gems that we need, it's just a quick jaunt through some trials. The first of them is the Soft Step trial. All we need to do is to get to the gem without being spotted by the roaming shadows. So we start up the trial, do a bit of sneaking, Misty step close to the end, and lockpick the final door. Then we grab the gem easy peasy and get out of there. Our next trial is the self-same trial, and for this one all we need to do is defeat the enemy that has been sabotaging Bartholomew the most, himself. Thankfully, he's a pushover and goes down easy for another Umbral Gem acquired. The last trial is the Faith Leap trial, a dark room with an invisible path to the other side. The answer of how to navigate this is on the floor at the start of the room, but who needs that when you've got a potion of glorious vaulting and the jump button? Before we continue on, we still have the problem of dealing with Balthazar and his band of undead, and before we deal with Balthazar, we have the problem of dealing with Flesh. To solve that problem, we head down to this pit of skulls and summon a rat who is secretly a small piece of a man who was split into many rats. We start a fight, kill the initial rat, and summon a horde of others in the process. We make sure to summon Flesh as well and get out of the way for the rats to have a field day on him. The only rats we have to worry about during this fight are these pink ones who explode when they die and put everyone around them to sleep. And sooner than you can say, "Dear God, that's a lot of rats, have I thought this through?" Flesh is down for the count. Eventually, the rats are all dealt with and the Justiciar man who is turned into them reappears and is ready to throw hands. But boy howdy does he really throw hands. He puts us to sleep, seemingly just to style on us, and then one-shots us with a blight. The encore goes much the same way while we wait for Flesh to die, which he eventually does do, it just takes a while. A long while. The main difference is afterwards, we stay posted behind a cloud of daggers and fire shots at rats from behind it. That way, if they get too close, they'll just die to the cloud. It works better than we can ever hope since the last rat runs into the cloud of daggers, which causes the Ratman himself to spawn there in rat form and also instantly die before he becomes a man again, saving us quite a headache. The classics are classics for a reason, what can I say? Now that baby brother's out of the way, it's time to get rid of Balthazar. Though he's got this funky little habit of drinking a potion of speed to rumble you instantly, so before the fight we make sure to pickpocket it away from him. Once we're in position, we get the drop on them by firing a slashing flourish at Balthi, triggering a fight and surprising all the ghoulish goons in the process. He does get to go first and lands a Ray of Sickness, dealing a bit of damage, but on our next turn we fire off an insane machine gun of shots, downing the stolen speed pod in the process to add insult to injury. On Balthazar's turn, a very scary cloud kill gets dropped on our heads, taking us frighteningly low. And we retaliate by breaking his concentration the old-fashioned way. R.I.P. Bozo. After that, we just clean up the remaining ghouls, and with some smart thinking, they don't pose a threat, and go down real easy. Before we get to freeing any immortal beings from their eternal prison and starting the world's greatest battle of the bands, we do a little bit of sabotage on some of the denizens of Moonrise to thin out their forces. And a buff we really can't ignore is the one we get from talking to Isabel, who is safe and sound on her balcony in the last light in. So Bartholomew goes to have a calm and normal chat with her to get that sweet, sweet necrotic resistance. As a fun little side note, this girl is Thisibald's sister. Can't you see the family resemblance? Anyways, we have a lovely chat with her and nothing bad happens at all, and oh my god, it's Flaming Fist Marcus coming to kidnap Isabel. Oh no, Isabel's got paralyzed by one of his demonic goons. Oh no again, Isabel got kidnapped by one of his demonic goons. Well, nothing like a second attempt to really get the blood flowing. And she got captured again. Having learned from our mistakes in the previous 2 attempts, Bartholomew is more than ready come attempt 3. With a precasted guidance to activate our concentration-based items and a bloodlust elixir in hand, we kill one of the Flaming Fist's fiendish foes. Then we try using a gaseous form scroll on Isabel, but apparently she's not considered an ally, and yeah, I get that. So we settle on getting another one of the fiends before throwing an invisibility pot on Isabel, who is instantly revealed by ourselves. I don't even know what to say, Izzy. Gotta keep her alive somehow though, so we tell Marcus a silly little joke which has him rolling on the floor with laughter for the rest of the fight since our spell save DC is ridiculously high. Isabel almost does something useful when she turns the fiends, but she immediately undoes the effect by hitting one of them, causing it to turn around and paralyze her, which might honestly be good since it keeps her from getting into more trouble. Thankfully, the world's greatest bard is here to save the day, and with a couple good shots and a few good swings, all the demons upstairs get murked. A couple more rounds and all the ones downstairs get got too. All that's left is Marcus, who still can't get over that joke, and I mean, if you were there, you'd probably feel the same. It was really great. To die for, some might say. And at long last, Isabel is safe, assuming she remains a lifelong fan after all that. Now, since Bartholomew has Selune's blessing, granting necrotic resistance, we're feeling ready to go free the Night Song. We pop open the door with the Umbral Gems, take the slow and spooky descent into the Shadowfell, and wake up in the world's most metal prison. At level 7 too, no less. With this level up, we get access to 4th level spells, for which we take Confusion to hopefully deal with larger crowds of enemies, since that's what we struggle with most. And we get a single 4th level spell slot to go with it. We also take the opportunity to swap out Plant Growth, which has been very disappointing, for Blindness, a spell that allows us to make enemies blind and isn't concentration. I cannot possibly overstate how important this spell is going to be, so keep an eye on it. And now we're going to go free the Night Song. We get to the bottom and meet the source of Kethric's immortality, a demigod who's the daughter of Selune who terribly misconstrues our noble intentions. We're just looking to create the sickest collab album in the nation. Bartholomew and the Harpers, featuring the Night Song. She says she'd be happy to work with us for just a bit, but first she needs what everyone needs now and then, a warm touch from a friend. And just like that, Dame Aylin is freed and Moonrise is quaking in its boots as the Harpers who see her passing are inspired to action. Time to take out Ketheric once and for all. Bartholomew rallies alongside all 6 of our allies at the tower, and the final battle of the bands breaks out after a short bit of dissing each other. That's right, it's Bartholomew and the Harpers versus Zarel and the Goons. This battle, as always, is pure chaos. We do our best to pick enemies off with our bow. Jaheira plops down an impressively poorly placed ice storm before charging in, while Zarel CCs the rest of us. Jaheira, for her efforts, gets taken out in the very first round, which has gotta be some sort of record for a legendary hero. The rest of our allies do their best, but their best is not the most impressive. Thankfully, Zarel takes a break to bully her own underling for not keeping up the tempo. Regardless of how good our allies can shoot, they do a great job acting as living shields. I mean, look at them go. On our turn, we use confusion to try and disrupt the enemies, and we manage to get 2 of them caught up in it, Zarel included, before running outside and closing the doors. As we're thinking of what to do on our next turn, Quartermaster Tally has enough of waiting around and joins the fight as well. Her courage spurs us on, and we decide to cast Stinking Cloud, which weirdly enough only covers one side of the door, but at the very least causes some folks running through it to lose their actions. With the fight moving outside, we get ready to initiate our survival plan as we continue firing pot shots into the crowd of enemies, taking 1 out. Then we misty step up to a nearby balcony where most enemies won't be able to reach us. Next round, we get a beautiful cloud of daggers on a large group of enemies, shredding away at them. Unfortunately, our hero, Quartermaster Tally, succumbs to an eldritch blast from Zarel soon after. We manage to take out one of the cronies below, but now most of our enemies are awkwardly crowding behind the opposite side of the wall where we can't reach them, so we do something that could get Bartholomew cancelled. Not knowing what else to do, we summon Scratch on the other side of the cloud of daggers in the hopes it would lead enemies outside and into the cloud. Zarel, however, barely even moves and just blows him up with a shatter. Oh, this is getting brought up at my next therapy session. The fight turns into us raining down arrows into whatever foe decides to wander outside in the next few rounds, leaving just 4 enemies remaining afterwards, Zarel among them. With the help of a Featherfall potion, we break the awkward ceasefire by jumping down and dashing towards the bridge. Then, the goons very thoughtfully run directly into the cloud of daggers and even stop inside of it, so we spend our next turn weakening them so the cloud finishes them off when they start theirs again, which works on one of them and further weakens the rest. From here on out, it's just picking off the remaining enemies as they fail to reach us while we kite them towards the bridge, till eventually even Zarel is dealt with. The Battle of the Bands victory goes to Bartholomew and the well, just Bartholomew now. Time to head inside, and oh my god, there's still people in here. What the heck? We start a fight with them, summon a fan of rock music, get brutally electrocuted, almost kill ourselves via Guardian of Faith, misty step to safety, turn invisible, watch our newest groupie crumble under the pressure, and heroically retreat. The Warden remains ever vigilant, watching for our return, so we sneak up to her, get the drop on her, but somehow no one else, and start swinging away in an attempt to build up our spell save DC. Before the rest of the enemies catch up to us, we only manage to get 2 stacks of arcane acuity, but we bite the bullet, down a potion of speed, and pray for Thunderwave to work. And miracle of miracles, it actually does. Since the Warden was the only tough opponent out of the group, the rest of them go down a moment later. All that's left is dealing with this joke of a necromancer and her skeletons, and we're up to the roof. Awaiting us at the top is Papa Thorm himself, who's more than a little upset that we revoked his immortality. We do our best to intimidate him into surrendering, but unfortunately he's got nerves of steel. Dame Aylin shows up anyways to whoop Ketheric's dusty booty and gives a rallying war cry before the fight breaks out proper. On our first turn, we use all of our bardic inspiration on Slashing Flourish after Slashing Flourish to take out the Necromancer in the center of the arena. And that's really the only threatening enemy that was here. The Necromites spend most of their turns missing us or doing pretty negligible damage, all while Ketheric gets beat up pretty bad by Aylin as she starts off with a heavy crit. We make sure to thin down the horde so she can keep the beatdown going on Papa K uninterrupted. And for the most part, that's how the fight goes by, although Aelin really isn't a fan of the whole her doing a beatdown part since she much prefers to miss her attacks instead. Either way, just a couple turns later and a cloud of daggers causes Ketheric to trigger his cutscene. And wouldn't you know it, Dame Aelin is just as bad in the cutscene as she is in the actual fight. Having been free for all of 5 minutes, she quickly gets slammed down and recaptured when Ketheric teleports both her and himself to safety somewhere below the tower. The fight gets cleaned up and we get ready to go plunging after them. Bartholomew jumps down a suspicious hole and lands in a mind flayer colony below, and it's in here that we find a room full of undead and fiends out the wazoo. Unfortunately for us, we need something on the other side of the room, so we pick a fight with them and get to it. We start off with a 3rd level cloud of daggers on the Death Shepherd in the center, since this guy is the linchpin of the whole operation, with his ability to resurrect any of the other enemies that get killed, and even summon new ones. This does result in a rather insane dog pile being formed around us, but it's nothing a Misty Step can't solve, followed by a 4th level cloud of daggers right into the middle of all of them. If you can't tell, I really love this spell. We keep moving down the hallway and lure a bunch of them through the cloud of daggers, which is just so satisfying. Then, a thunderwave gets used to blast back some of the horde encroaching upon us. The Death Shepherd, by the way, is taking his sweet time getting over to us and mostly undoing our work along the way. Eventually, we get to this spot and we're able to buy some more time with a thunderwave to push enemies away and a cloud of daggers to get those who remain. Our concentration gets broken right after though, and it's clear something's gotta give since this strategy isn't getting us anywhere. So on our next turn we use a defensive flourish to boost our AC and a slashing flourish to trigger the elixir of bloodlust. And as we're looking for what to do next, we notice that Thunderwave can blast enemies into this pit here where the Death Shepherd might not be able to reach them, and like that, a glimmer of hope is found. But we learn the hard way that hope is a fleeting thing when the Death Shepherd resurrects a winged horror that was flung off the cliff, which is just plain cheating if you ask me. To make matters worse, the zombies get a great round with a crit followed by a couple of hits that triggers our half-work feature, and we're looking extra dire. Needing to make some big plays, we kill a zombie with our bonus action, so we have 2 actions, slam down a couple of potions to heal up, and completely whiff a thunderwave. We run away a bit more and take a nasty crit in the process, and a winged horror also lands a hit on us, taking us down to almost 0 HP. Regardless, we manage to make it to next round where we defensive flourish and pick off some more enemies to try and boost our odds of survival. And Bartholomew remembers that one really funny joke that took Marcus out of the fight, so we give it a whirl on the Death Shepherd, but he doesn't find it nearly as funny. Somehow we manage to make it to the next round and try Tasha's hideous laughter again, and this time it actually works. From here, with the eternal tide of enemies being resurrected finally staunched, we can pick off the enemies one by one until it's just us and the Death Shepherd left. And we show him that pits do in fact mean that you're dead and gone with a thunderwave. Our reward for this fight is a puzzle, but Bartholomew is secretly giga-brained, so we solve it with ease. And our reward for the puzzle is a brain in a jar which, once hooked up to a disembodied head, we can speak to. After speaking to it, we're able to unlock the Githzerai Mind Barrier, a permanent buff that grants us advantage on intelligence saving throws for the rest of the run, which is going to be amazing in parts of Act 3 especially. At last, we descend to the depths of the colony where we find Ketheric talking to Orin and Gortash, the other 2 big bads who, with the power of some super cool rocks, are able to control the Absolute herself, who we find out is a nether brain. Thankfully, they dip out, taking the nether brain with them, leaving Ketheric chilling by himself with a mind flayer, some necromites, some intellect devourers, as well as Aelin in the back corner being held captive. We fire off a shot to start the fight and... oh, wait, sorry, never mind. Ketheric's got a monologue first. Okay, now the fight starts. On our first turn, we down an invisibility potion, scuttle over to where the Night Song is imprisoned, and free her yet again. The first phase of this fight really isn't too hard, with the exception of the Mind Flayer, so we take it out pretty early on and poke down some of the other goons here and there. And shoot Ketheric as he moves about awkwardly on the center platform until we send him into phase 2, where a literal god of death turns him into his avatar. Oh boy, phase 2. Phase 2 is a bit of a nightmare, with a bone chill aura that prevents Aelin from getting back up once she's knocked down, a beam that deals unavoidable damage and has a chance to frighten us, as well as a map-wide AoE that damages us and pulls us toward it should we fail a save. And to make matters worse, he can heal himself by eating his goons, which also unlocks the ability to cast Finger of Death, an insanely high damaging spell. This fight took absolute ages. We tried a bunch of different strategies, used different elixirs, tried different weapons, but we just kept dying. Until, right before I was about to give up and go back to an older save to grind out more levels, we decide to give it one more try. Before the fight, we make sure all of our buffs are in order. The main difference being that instead of an Elixir of Bloodlust, we're using Heroism, which grants us 10 temp HP and an extra 1d4 added to all attacks and saving throws. We're also using the bow we picked up earlier, Least Expected, since it has a +2 modifier and a blinding shot, and we've already used Hunter's Mark from our other bow this long rest. And to top it off, we've got Protection from Evil and Good to give all our enemies disadvantage on attacks against us, and we're immune to being frightened by them. We start off the fight and blaze through phase 1, bursting down the Mind Flayer, and taking out Ketheric, whose high AC matters less thanks to an added Oil of Accuracy granting us a +2 to hit with our bow. Then we throw down some Haste Spores to give us an extra action and try and blind Merkel, whose legendary resistance doesn't work on the spell for some reason. Unfortunately, he saves regardless. To increase our damage a bit more, we coat our weapon in an Oil of Combustion at this point too, which causes fire explosions when we deal fire damage to this target. On his turn, he blasts us a little with the old Fear Ray, but we're immune to getting frightened thanks to the aforementioned Protection spell, and our concentration gets a nice boost from our Elixir. On our next turn, we finally land the blind, and this does a ton for us. It prevents Merkel from using the Fear Ray on us, gives us advantage on all our attacks, and to top it off, prevents him from consuming any of his goons, which means no healing and no Finger of Death. So we just spend the rounds shooting him down with every bit of damage we can muster, and maintaining the blindness with both our spell and the blinding shot until he is nice and low. Whereupon we unload our last couple slashing flourishes that we had been saving, and with the help of a potion of speed, finally finish him off. And it definitely didn't take 3 whole hours. With him out of the way, we grab his shiny rock for our collection, reunite Isabel and Aelin and their duet in a touching moment, and at last move on to the road to Baldur's Gate, where the final spot of our tour awaits. Our journey continues as our weary hero gets some much-needed rest on the road to Baldur's Gate. He does have a show to prepare for, after all, but some clinging stands find out where he's sleeping and jump him in the middle of the night. Thankfully, they left the portal they arrived from open as a convenient way for us to escape. So as the fight starts, we just dash, and Misty Step, and completely ignore all the Gith who showed up to try and gank us, and we wind up in a veritable acid trip with our dream visitor calling for help. As we rush to save our handsome short king, we first have to fight through some of the Gith who are getting ganged up on by a group of friendly intellect devourers, who very quickly get blown up by the invading astral monks, though on our turn we get some wild couple of crits to take out the first of them, and the remaining one takes out our last intellect devouring pal before getting likewise destroyed by Bartholomew. We jump down to the giant floating god skull while questioning if this isn't one big fever dream, and meet a friendly mind flayer getting trounced by a whole bunch of Gith trying to free one of their fellows who is imprisoned. To make matters worse, this mind flayer who calls himself the Emperor is actually our dream visitor, which is just, I miss our short king already. Anyways, we decide to help him out and jump into action to defeat the Gith. The fight starts off, and after one of our Brainiac pals goes down, we learn the hard way just how tough these guys are, as they bully the bejesus out of us, and our first attempt goes down fast. For attempts 2, we prepare a little bit more by downing an elixir of Hill Giant Strength and precasting Guidance with the idea of just yeeting the Gith into the abyss, and we start off the fight. Only problem is when we press the throw button, we have disadvantage on throwing them because we're too close, which is an interesting problem to have when throwing someone. So we settle for a defensive flourish followed by a regular stab to deal some damage and boost our AC by 4. Then the enemies shred through the devourers before landing a couple hits on us, breaking our concentration and lowering our damage since the Thornblade and Strange Conduit ring will no longer be active. Thankfully, the Emperor lands a nice stun, and this time we seize the opportunity to take out one of the Gith and heroically hide behind him while using a potion to heal up. Our haters really don't want to see the next Bartholomew album though, and with a series of blows take us down to next to no health, hold person us, and then fireball us, triggering our half-orc feature, which strangely enough breaks us out of the hold person. Realizing things are desperate, we blast a couple of them back with Thunderwave to this obviously open edge before downing a speed pot to finish them off with another, before the game reveals, just kidding, there actually is a wall here. As such, we can't get both, but we do manage to get one, and by some small miracle, the next couple attacks miss us, and we make it to the next round. We then hit the enemy next to us with an offhand attack to top off our arcane acuity stacks, and then cast blindness, followed by throwing a healing potion and an invisibility pot so we don't have to deal with all this nonsense for at least one round. Our former Dream Visitor stuns one of them during this time, and we break our invisibility by finishing him off with a couple slashing flourishes and a defensive flourish. We also take another speed pot so we don't lose our next turn. The Emperor is really proving his worth though with yet another stun, leaving room for us on our next turn to drop a sick cloud of daggers and finish off the last Gith. Our reward is a whole bunch of exposition that basically amounts to the Emperor telling us he's super justified in manipulating us by pretending to be our Dream Visitor, and the Gith he has imprisoned is Orpheus, a prince who is the source of our protection from the tadpole in our heads. He also offers us another tadpole, but we don't even want the one we do have, so we yeet it off a cliff and move along to our real reward. Upon hitting level 8, we get a 5th Bardic Inspiration charge, which is phenomenal, and we also gain access to another spell for which we choose Invisibility to help us in any stealth missions and as a desperate get-out-of-jail-free card, alongside another 4th level spell slot. We also take the Warcaster feat, which gives us advantage on any concentration saving throws and lets us cast Shocking Grasp in place of our normal opportunity attack. Absolutely huge for us going forward, as we're much less likely to drop spells. The next morning we continue on the road to Baldur's Gate, where we end up in Rivington, a small town just on the outskirts, and are immediately beset upon by a young fan who complains about a dead mother or something. I don't know. We give her our signature to make her day and continue on. As it turns out, the circus is in town, so naturally we meander inside, and when we stumble upon a mephit, don't worry, not the magma kind, who offers to make a statue of us, how could we refuse? And only for the measly price of 5,000 gold. When we get back to camp, our statue is already there, T-posing in all its Bartholomew glory, an extremely worthwhile purchase just for the aesthetics, not to mention it gives us the sweet Stone Features permanent buff. A buff which grants us an extra 1d4 to all of our saving throws and attack rolls. Forever. Kinda wild and well worth the dosh. Then we're back to the circus, where we see a Wheel of Chance game with a slimy looking Djinn running the show. To make sure he can't pull one over on us, first we steal his mage hand ring, and then chat with him to give the game a shot. We find out the poor bloke is obviously hard of seeing, before giving the wheel a go and winning the jackpot on our first try. Unfortunately, this results in him getting pretty heated and accusing us of cheating, resulting in us getting teleported to a dinosaur-filled jungle. However, we're not too stressed since we can just turn invisible, loot the jungle for all it's worth, throw ourselves into the dinosaurs just a little, and get out through a conveniently placed portal at the far end of the area. One such piece of loot we managed to get was the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. This bad boy makes it so whenever we hit a creature with a weapon attack, we can then cast any illusion or enchantment spell as a bonus action. This of course works crazily well in conjunction with our arcane acuity, allowing us to cast spells that will disable whole groups of enemies as a bonus action, a long-term staple that'll be replacing our caustic band. And before we leave the circus, we also paint our faces with clown makeup cause, well, why not? Though it really doesn't show up well. Continuing our journey, we follow the road to the city proper and find out it's closed since Gortash is in the midst of getting coronated as Archduke. We do our best to convince the guard we belong, but it doesn't go well. So we do what any rock star would do in this situation. We down a potion of flying and simply phase through the drawbridge. Now that we're inside the fortress, we meet Lord Enver Gortash, who looks like he's still stuck in his MCR phase, and despite being surrounded by people, he openly talks of his villainous plans and offers to team up with us if we take out Orin for him. We of course have no problem with at least pretending to be buds for now, but if we're to throw the concert of a lifetime, we'll still have to take him and his steel watch out at some point to ensure the authorities don't stop us from partying like the world is ending. But for now, we've earned entry into the city at last, and we head straight to everyone's second favorite armor vendor, Gloomy Fentonson, who sells us the Armor of Agility. The Armor of Agility is medium armor with a 17 base AC that lets us add our full Dex mod to our armor class, which means with our Cloak of Protection and our Dex mod at +5, our base AC is now 23. In addition, it doesn't impose disadvantage on stealth checks, and it gives a +2 to every single saving throw we make for a crazy all-around boost to our survivability. Unfortunately, we end up a little short on money, so we look for the most expensive building nearby to rob and wind up meeting this bozo from Act 1 in front of Sorceress Sundries. And even though we're the one with the clown makeup on, he still manages to make a bigger fool out of himself by demanding to know where the night song is, all while refusing to look us in the eye, but we tell him we never even found the night song and he kinda just buggers off, leaving behind a whole mountain of experience. Now that he's out of the way, we head to the top of the tower where we meet the head honcho Leroican, who is absolutely starstruck by us and lets us just wander about his tower freely, which is very poorly thought out by him since this results in us stealing every single thing that isn't bolted down. And oh boy, is this man just rolling in the dough. We're talking magical artifacts and super powerful spells out the wazoo. One of the books that we steal, the Tharkiate Codex, does curse us, but after casting Remove Curse, that turns into a permanent buff that gives us 20 temp HP after each long rest, so not really a curse. And after having our fill of gold and valuable artifacts, we walk out the front door and head straight to everyone's first favorite armor vendor, Damon, who sells us the Legacy of the Masters and the Boots of Persistence. The Legacy of the Masters is a pair of gloves that gives us a +2 bonus to attack and damage rolls with weapons, and a +1 to our strength saves, basically just giving us more reliable damage in general. And the Boots of Persistence are boots that gives us a permanent freedom of movement and long strider, meaning we can't be slowed by difficult terrain, can't be magically paralyzed or restrained, and gain an extra 3 meters of move speed, and we gain a +1 to our dex saves to boot. Pun intended. But we can't be a rock star without having a memorable look, so we get our clothes nice and dyed to match our vibe, and then head to a local salon to get our hair cleaned up and dye that too. And now we're really ready to take on the city. With that, it's time to go out on the town and show off what we got. Naturally, that means we're going to go down to some hidden docks and interrupt a gang fight to test out our new magical gear. Bartholomew finds a couple of gangs easily enough, and after getting called mean names, we get into the fight. Now, I'm not gonna lie, most of this fight gets pretty well solved when we drop a 4th level Cloud of Daggers on 5 whole enemies, but we do also get to do some pretty cool other stuff, like attacking an enemy, and bonus actioning out a Vicious Mockery. This fight is pretty easy though, especially when we realize just how useful it is to be able to hold person multiple enemies as a bonus action, even if some of them manage to make the save. And after we learn that, the fight gets cleaned up nice and quickly. We do some other meandering about too. We solve a murder mystery by murdering some mysterious folks, get the moves put on us by the Emperor, head to the sewers and definitely did not die to random angry homeless people, and meet a mud wizard who we convince we mean no harm, which is just enough to bump us up to level 9. Level 9 bumps our proficiency bonus up to +4, increasing most of our rolls by 1, and we also get our first 5th level spell, Dominate Person. We also swap out Long Strider for Hold Monster at the same time, since both of these spells can be cast as a bonus action thanks to our newest ring, and Long Strider is made redundant by our boots. We also, of course, get one 5th level spell slot to go along with our newest spells, and another 4th level one too. During our gallivanting of the city, we find good old Volathamp, who thanks to all your comments I now know is not a bard, but a wizard, and he's all tied up and strapped to a bunch of explosive barrels that are about to be set on fire by an angry crowd. Naturally, we decide to rescue our homie, and the fight starts, and what the heck? Okay. Anyways, the fight starts, and we break the chair Volo is tied to, freeing him in the process. Then we whack one of the dudes with a defensive flourish to boost up our AC, and bonus action Hideous Laughter another person to take them out of the fight. Most of the enemies miss us, but one gets a nasty crit, taking out about half of our HP. On Bartholomew's turn, we use our bonus action to hit an enemy to stack up Arcane Acuity and drop a sick Thunder Wave on 3 of the enemies, sending all of them to the briny deep. Next round, a defensive flourish gets used to make sure we survive, and an upcasted hold person takes out 2 more enemies out of the fight, and from here we're pretty much in the clear. Although one does manage to break out pretty quickly. Still, it's nothing that we can't clean up with a good few stabs, and as we're learning, with the Helmet of Arcane Acuity and the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, we're kind of a crowd control machine. With Volo nice and safe, we have a quick chat before he tells us he'll meet us at our camp later. After we know our homie is sequestered away, we get a little silly and head to the local bank, where, as it turns out, the head clerk is a big Bartholomew fan and gives us a temporary vault pass to let us in. So we abuse his good faith and rob the bank for all it's worth. I mean, honestly though, what are these people expecting? Like, there's not a single guard in this place, and most of the security measures can be turned off by shooting a button. It would be rude of us not to rob them. It does make a bit more sense when we find out the guards are being occupied by other robbers, but we take care of all of them quickly enough and prove that Bartholomew is the superior thief. Elsewhere in the city, we stumble upon Marina from Act 1, who's taken it upon herself to hunt down Ethel once and for all. Since this will net us a great reward, we offer to help her out. Along the way, we get into yet another bar fight, which is becoming a bad habit, and also find Ethel's secret hideout and free some of her stands from their poor decision-making skills. A moment later, we get enough experience to hit level 10, which gives us quite a hefty power spike. Our Bardic Inspiration dice go up to a D10 instead of a D8. We gain expertise in 2 skills, Sleight of Hand and Performance, about time for the latter. We also get a new cantrip for which we take Minor Illusion to help distract folks if need be, a new spell learned in the form of Hypnotic Pattern for some massive CC as a bonus action, alongside another 5th level spell slot to go with it. And to top it all off, we take Blur and Counterspell from our Magical Secrets feature, which allows us to take 2 spells from any class list, both of which will be insanely valuable tools in our kit for keeping ourselves alive, making most fights significantly easier. Now that we're nice and powered up, we go into the Ethel fight with the Protection from Evil and Good active, as well as a Poison Resistance Elixir to make sure this fight is a breeze. There is a gimmick to this fight, but before that, don't worry, I did brew the potion to make Ethel throw up the child who has been living inside of her stomach, which, yeah, she's not a fan of. Go figure. Anyways, we gotta take out the mushrooms scattered throughout this room, otherwise Ethel will keep coming back to life whenever we kill her, and we've also gotta take them out in 1 turn each since they fully heal each round. The fight doesn't stress us out too much though. With Protection from Evil and Good, all of her attacks have disadvantage against us, and for most of them, even if they do land, we have resistance thanks to our elixir. The only thing we need to watch out for is Insect Plague, which shreds through chunks of our HP, but it's nothing a healing potion can't fix. Either way, we take out the mushrooms decently easy with the help of some slashing flourishes, stop some insect plagues with our brand new counterspell, find out there's some hag-specific vicious mockery lines, and send Ethel the same way as the dodo. We get a reward once we talk to Mayrina in the form of the Fey Semblance Amulet. This amulet is pretty straightforward in that it gives advantage on all mental saving throws. That's Wisdom, Charisma, and Intelligence. We won't be using this for the rest of the game, but it will be a staple of our build for most of what remains. Still in search of the best place for our big show, we swing by the Tsar Palace, and I don't think this is gonna be it, guys. There's just a little bit too many bats. But I've heard it's a great space for hosting big parties, so let's take a look around. Oh my god, it's the furry convention, but my goodness, this place is rather roomy. Either way, we precasted Blur, and on our first turn we go for a defensive flourish to make ourselves nigh unkillable with an AC of 27, and all enemies have disadvantage on attacking us. And we just kinda watch as the convention goers spend an eternity missing us. That's pretty much how the whole fight goes, but with a few well-placed spells and a couple good whacks, we wrap this all up so we can take a proper gander at the rest of the venue. As we look around the place, we find it's got quite the spacious basement, and who should be waiting down here but the man of the house, Cazador Sar, who is more than a little peeved that we're interrupting his own show. The first attempt of this fight goes extremely poorly, since I had forgotten to turn Counterspell back on after turning it off earlier, which means Bartholomew ended up taking a full force blight to the face, which got rid of most of our HP and broke our concentration on our precasted Blur. And then a couple of healing potions decided not to work since we were standing on stairs, leaving us nice and low for a ghoul to come in with a crit to finish us off. Not a good time all around. Our next go around starts much better since we're able to counterspell the blight that got us last time. Now that we're actually in the fight, it's worth mentioning Cazador's gimmick, that being his ritual sources who are all being drained around the arena. He starts with 7 of them, and for each one he gets additional temp HP and extra necrotic damage on every source of pain he inflicts upon us. Not to mention some of the ritual sources grant extra boons like +5 to AC or health regen each round. So, on our turn, we move over top of one of these sigils, which gives us the benefits of that one ritual source instead of him, and we shoot a bat to trigger our Elixir of Bloodlust before we use a defensive flourish, as well as a few more shots on one of the fellas being drained to hopefully interrupt the ritual. Most of the goons spend their turns dashing on up to us with the exception of Chatterteeth, who uses Eye Bite in an attempt to knock us out. If that goes through, the fight is instantly over, so we try and counterspell, which fails, but luckily we still succeed the saving throw. This does mean that Cazador gets to cast Blight on us again, which we really can't do much about, and that also breaks our Blur. As always, Bartholomew starts by sacrificing a bat to the Bloodlust Elixir, and then we use our bonus action to drop a fat Confusion on the majority of the arena, followed up with a beautiful Thunderwave taking 2 werewolves off the edge. Being confused, however, is apparently just code for acting completely normally, since most of the enemies just run up to us and attack us anyways, which is very cool. And Papa Tsar continues to be little more than a drain on our spell slots. Not wanting to have to deal with Chatterteeth at the same time, we use the majority of our turn and a couple of slashing flourishes to take him out. Afterwards, oh no, I forgot about this. Cazador becomes the Vampire Ascendant, since we didn't take out any of the ritual sources in time, which gives him a permanent 7d10 extra necrotic damage on every attack, massively increased move speed, AC boosted by 5, and he heals 7d10 at the start of all of his turns. Oh yeah, and a permanent legendary resistance, which means +10 to pretty much every saving throw. Well, nothing to do for it now. We continue forward with a defensive flourish using up our last bardic inspiration, and after gaining an extra action thanks to Bloodlust, we Thunderwave a good majority of the enemies off the edge. And we sprinkle in some healing since we will really need it. Another Blight gets sent our way, but it doesn't really matter how much damage Sar can do so long as we keep counterspelling. Back to us, and we send yet another ghoul off the edge, leaving just a werewolf and the vampire ascended himself as the main threats here. Despite legendary resistance being a thing, we managed to get a blindness off on the head honcho too, which honestly isn't really that great since he can still just move up to us and cast a spell anyways, but we at least get advantage on attack rolls as long as it's active. Either way, next turn a final Thunderwave is used to take care of the werewolf, and we are now awfully low on spell slots. We also run up to Cazador and give him a quick little whack before using a Scroll of Hideous Laughter to preserve our spell slots for more meaningful uses. He does save, unfortunately. Another round goes by, meaning another counterspell gets used just to stay alive. And since Hideous Laughter had a 70% chance to succeed according to the game, which in retrospect I don't think it was counting legendary resistance, we decide to give it another go on our next turn anyways. It doesn't work, so we vent by burning away most of the bats since they've been pecking away at us. Papa Bloodsucker uses one more Call Lightning, and we say good riddance to our final spell slot to counterspell it. Bartholomew really has had enough of these bats though, and blows the last of them up with an Alchemist Fire. Now it's just us and the big man himself, so we decide to change that. Never too late in the game to bring in the groupies. Using a scroll, we summon a diva to help whoop this undead booty. From here on out, the fight is pretty straightforward. Cazador drops a big spell on us, then we use whatever potions we can to heal up, and after summoning another ally in the form of a flame elemental, we just whittle away at his health. It takes a long time, but we mix in some more spell scrolls here and there to speed things up, and we manage to outpace his healing enough to finally take him out after what feels like ages. Now that's how you put on a show, Cazador. Though we ultimately do decide against using this venue for any future concerts. Our real reward for this encounter is Rhapsody. Rhapsody is a +1 dagger that gives an extra +1 bonus to attack rolls, damage, and spell save DCs for each foe killed with a max of +3. This does reset on a long rest, but during the time of recording this, you could stack this up by destroying anything with a health bar, even boxes, which is what we usually did. And you can consume these stacks to use an extra special move of your choice, though we never used any of them since they're really not worth it. Plus, as an extra bonus, if we hit an enemy while hiding or invisible, we have a chance to inflict the bleeding condition. Not that this was useful either. Regardless, this item is worth it for the +3 to everything alone, since it makes our spells even harder for enemies to resist, and we'll be replacing our Thornblade with it. Since our search for a venue was a bit of a bust, we decided to turn our attention to the problem of the police. We can't have them showing up and ruining everyone's fun after all, so we head to the Steelwatch Foundry in search of a way to disable them. Once inside, we meet Gondian Xanar Tubin, a gnome who helps build and maintain the Steel Watch. From him, we learn the gnomes that are keeping this place going are being held against their will. If they try and break free, the explosive collars around their necks will detonate, killing them all, and to make matters worse, their families are being held prisoner in an underwater prison called the Iron Throne. If we save them, Mr. Tubin and his pals here will help us tear down the Popo, so it's off to the watery depths with us. We managed to find the submarine that they used to transport prisoners to and from the Iron Throne pretty quickly and use it to head there ourselves. Along the way, Gortash lets us know he's been pirating our music this whole time using LimeWire, and we're no longer besties. Naturally, this enrages Bartholomew. Not the bestie thing, the pirating thing, and once inside he gets to freeing as many people as he can. Which, as it turns out, is not very many people. We do get a couple here and there, freeing some from their cells with a bow shot, and others just by running up and pulling the lever, including some guy called the Grand Duke? I don't know, he sounds important, but he can't be that important since he gets murked in like 6 seconds. Regardless, we manage to free a decent chunk of Gondians and get out of dodge before the whole place gets blown sky high. Or ocean deep, I guess? Now that we've gained some more devout groupies, we head back to Xanar to tell him the good news, and find he's in the middle of getting yelled at, so we start our revolution right then and there. We start raging against the machine with a good couple thwacks to one of the baddies, and then cast Blur on ourselves to stay nice and safe. And as the NPCs start beating each other up, we quickly realize that the Gondians we just worked so hard to get on our side are really not that great. The main thing we're afraid of in this fight is the enemy spellcasters, who can cause us to take unavoidable damage, and some of them also have an Aura of Terror, which gives us disadvantage on attacks and saving throws. So on our next turn, we hit one of them, breaking their concentration on Spirit Guardians, and find out the hard way that we are not immune to our own hypnotic pattern, which makes a lot of sense honestly, but either way it still breaks the concentration of all the goons, so it's not all bad. Unfortunately, all of our allies get got during the next round, and in the middle of all of it, one of the baddies initiates the destruction sequence of their bomb necklaces. Now we could try and stop it to save the Gondians downstairs and have them join us in the next fight, but if they're anything like these guys, it's probably better to focus on saving our own hide. And since we don't have to focus on saving the little guys anymore, the fight gets way easier. We drop a big ol' hypnotic pattern which takes most of the enemies out of the fight for a couple turns, followed by a cloud of daggers which shreds away at a large group of them, and then a good few melee stabs to finish the job. Before we head to the basement, we make sure to speak with Xander one more time to figure out how to disable the steel watch for good. Once we make it downstairs, a fight starts with the rest of the Foundry, who are thankfully all injured from their tussle with the Gondians that were working down here. Bartholomew does what he always does when overwhelmed, cast Blur, and he stands in a corner. Our biggest concern, the spellcasters, is largely mitigated when one of them casts Silence in a massive area surrounding us. Which means this fight is just a matter of us defensive flourishing, keeping Blur up, and slowly whittling away at the enemies. It takes a long while, but it is sped up with the help of a Bloodlust elixir until eventually it's just us and 2 Hellfire Watchers left. The only problem is, these guys, as the name suggests, spew Hellfire at us, which deals a boatload of unmitigatable damage. Even resistance and immunity has no effect, which is a little scary for us, and at one point we get brought quite low because of it. Realizing we need to reposition and find a safe spot, we prepare an arrow of transposition to shoot ourselves up to safety, and despite the preview saying it will land us in the rafters, when we fire it, this happens. I was more than a little upset, so we downed a potion of speed to cast invisibility, which broke initiative, allowing us to leave and rest up as well as cash in our newest level up. Upon hitting level 11, we get a 6th level spell in the form of Otto's Irresistible Dance for some high-end crowd control that buys us at least 1 guaranteed turn of safety, and we also swap out Confusion for Glyph of Warding, since Confusion has been ridiculously lackluster and we could really use some more reliable AoE damage, especially with varied damage types, and of course we get a 6th level spell slot to go with our new spells. Now that we're feeling more powerful, we walk back downstairs and finish off the remaining Hellfire Watchers, who blow up when we bring them even moderately low, which seems like a bit of an overreaction if you ask me. After resting up, downing an elixir of bloodlust, and precasting Blur on ourselves to make sure we don't get hit, we head to the final room of the Foundry, where we face 3 Hellfire Watchers and a Steel Watcher Titan. We spend our first turn just building up our arcane acuity and boosting our AC with a defensive flourish as well as a few other hits. And the Titan tries to cast Hellfire Curse on us, which would give us disadvantage on any physical saves. Since that's not something we want to deal with and we don't have any other uses for a counterspell, we'll pretty much be using our reaction on this every time. Once it gets back to Bartholomew, we cast Chain Lightning using a scroll since all of these enemies are vulnerable to lightning, and it deals an absurd amount of damage. So much damage that one of them starts to self-destruct on their next turn, and we get the chance to mobile flourish another one into the self-destruction radius. Barely, but it works. Also worth mentioning just how great Warcaster's Opportunity Attack is in this fight because of the lightning vulnerability. Anyways, the Hellfire Watcher blows up, which causes the other Hellfire Watcher to start blowing up, while the Titan cowers for its life and initiates the world's most telegraphed attack. With only 1 Hellfire Watcher left, we just cast a couple Lightning Glyph of Wardings on it until it decides to end it all too. Then we just rinse and repeat with the Titan itself for quite a few turns. I'd even go so far as to say quite a many turns, until it too initiates the self-destruct sequence. Whereupon we heroically run into the other room and shut the door behind us before hitting the end turn button and watching the experience roll in. We also make sure to pick up Gaunter Mail before we leave, which is a really good bow that we can't really use since we don't have proficiency, but it is still a surprise tool that will help us later. Then we do our best heroic run to escape the Foundry before it blows up, all in a day's work. Now that the Popo is out of the way, we still gotta take out Gortash to make sure they can't rebuild, so we head to the top of his keep, precast Blur, and go into the fight with an Elixir of Bloodlust active to boot. This fight shows off just how dominant we've become. The goons are more of the same from the Steel Foundry, and we can take them out nice and quick, and with a bonus action upcasted hold person, the whole fight becomes easy mode. And we get to pick up some grenades here and there for later use as an added bonus. although one gets blasted right into some fire and instantly blows up, almost one-shotting us, but other than that, the fight goes down without a cinch. Gortash doesn't even get to phase 2. After he goes down, we steal his cool rock to show our adoring fans later, and we take the chance to head back to camp and party hard. Once back in camp, we realize that Orin has been neatly stacking letters on the floor, and buried in these letters is an invitation to join a record label. Naturally, we jump on the opportunity, and all it takes is killing a celestial and bathing in the blood of innocence, which for the music industry is actually surprisingly tame. Well, here we also buy the Vicious Shortbow, a +2 shortbow that makes it so when we crit, we deal an extra 7 damage. Nothing too wild, but it'll be our main bow for the rest of the run since it works nicely with Hold Person and Hold Monster, which we can cast as a bonus action. Unfortunately, once we get to the scene of Orin's celebration party, the mood is kinda in the dumps, and we find out Orin has kidnapped one of our groupies and is holding them hostage. Naturally, this cannot stand, so she turns into a giant, thing, and we draw our blades. This fight has quite the obnoxious gimmick. Orin herself has 12 stacks of Unstoppable, which reduce all damage she takes to 1 and prevents her from being moved against her will, and she gets all of these stacks back each round, so long as the goons around her are casting this ritual. The main problem with that is all of these goons also have Sanctuary on them, which means you can only take them out with AoE. This, combined with the fact that Orin herself is a monster that can attack something ridiculous like 5 times in a round, and she starts with 2 thugs helping her out regularly, results in us getting got over and over and over again. On our 6th attempt, we finally figured out a strategy that might work, so we give it a go. Before the fight, we coat our bow with Crawler Mucus, a poison that requires the target to make a DC 13 Constitution save or become poisoned and paralyzed. We also go in with an Elixir of Heroism active too to help with saving throws, mainly since we keep getting knocked prone or stunned by the enemies. Bartholomew gets first in initiative and starts with an arrow of many targets to max out our arcane acuity, and we get Orin as well as a couple of goons afflicted with the Crawler Mucus. Then, we drop Atasha's Hideous Laughter on Orin, which completely lays her out, making sure she stays out of the fight even if the poison wears off. Finally, we fire off a Slashing Flourish on the last goon that can still move about, and start chipping away at her Unstoppable. She tries to stun us, which thankfully fails, and then runs up to get nice and close, which gives us the chance to bonus action stab her to bump up arcane acuity, followed by a Thunder Wave, sending both her and an unfortunate ritual caster off the edge. We rinse and repeat for literally everyone else in the arena, sending them off the cliff and taking our time, since Orin just cannot break out of our Hideous Laughter due to our high spell save DC from Arcane Acuity and Rhapsody. After that, we spend another small eternity blasting down Orin's Unstoppable stacks, using the odd spell scroll here and there to make it go a little bit faster. And when every stack is dealt with, we perform a rendition of everyone's favorite Thunder Wave to finish the job. Our reward is another shiny rock to add to our collection, the freedom of our groupie and her unending adoration, as well as Bloodthirst. Bloodthirst is a +2 dagger that reduces our critical threshold by 1, allows us to cast True Strike once per long rest as a bonus action, and when wielded in the main hand gives any enemy we stab with it vulnerability to piercing damage. This is an extremely good weapon and we will use it at some point, but not just yet. Before we wrap up our tour of the city, we've got a few more things to do. To start, we unveil a hidden passage in the prison of Worm's Rock, then we solve some puzzles, and after that we hit level 12. Level 12 is our final level, and with it we get our final feat. We end up taking Resilient, which is a feat that gives us +1 to any ability and proficiency in that corresponding saving throw. Since we're struggling with wisdom saves mostly, we select that. We also learn one final spell in the form of Dissonant Whispers. It's nothing fancy, but it does have a chance to fear enemies and deals a decent bit of damage. Plus, we can cast it as a bonus action, which is the main reason why we took it. With that out of the way, we head to the final portion of this hidden passage where we find a big old dead dragon, and just behind it the Helm of Baldur. We yoink the helmet and for quite a while consider putting it on as our main helmet. Obviously, we don't want to get rid of our Helmet of Arcane Acuity, but in between sessions, Larian actually changed the way the condition works. Now, Arcane Acuity stacks up to 10 instead of 7. However, when we take damage from anything, we lose 2 stacks of it. This makes it a lot harder to keep our Acuity up in fights against spellcasters or large groups of enemies in general, so we consider swapping it out, but ultimately decide to use our Helmet of Arcane Acuity for the majority of the rest of the game. Then Bartholomew goes to investigate the dragon corpse, which as it turns out is not as dead as we would hope. From this dragon we learned the Emperor was once his friend back when he was known by his mortal name, Baldurin, as in the founder of the city, Baldurin. But now there's some bad blood between the two and the dragon tries to take their rage out on us. I'll spare you the gory details of this fight, since it really is just rather tedious. None of our CC spells work on this dragon, and he only has 2 attacks, which never do enough damage to seriously hurt us once we down an elixir of lightning resistance. Unless you count his super AoE attack, which we can just avoid by hiding in this building. So the fight turns into an hour-long slog of us shooting him for barely any damage, while he does the same to us, until we finally take him out. Next up, we end up going to a self-help clinic to help us deal with our record label contract falling out and all the emotions that follow, where yet another cult resides in their basement. Like, this is just getting out of hand. Who is building all of these cavernous underground spaces? Anyways, a fight breaks out because we don't have some girl named Shadowheart with us. I don't even know who that is, so we get to defending ourselves from these wackadoodles. The first time goes pretty poorly since they can just blind us by casting darkness and then stop us healing with a bone chill, so we can't do much when they eventually take us out. Luckily for us, we picked up a Steel Watcher helmet from the foundry before blowing it up, which grants us immunity to being blinded amongst other things. And with the help of that helmet, Blur, and an elixir of bloodlust, the second attempt goes way smoother. After we clear up the cultists, we get to raiding their basement for anything good and find a Mirror of Loss, which allows us to, after a few successful checks, trade a -2 in one stat for a +2 in another. We trade in our intelligence for a boost to our dexterity, bumping it up to 22 and increasing our modifier to a +6. Regardless of what we chose to trade in, we can still just take a long rest to get rid of the debuff while keeping the buff. Remember, if you're feeling cursed, just take a nap. Since the record label deal fell out, and so did our attempts to learn how to deal with our tangle of emotions, we meet up with Raphael, who has been teasing us with the idea of making us famous this whole playthrough. This time he actually follows through though, and as a signing bonus he offers up the Hammer of Orpheus to free the fellow being held prisoner by the Emperor, so we don't have to deal with his creepy tentacled butt anymore. And oh my god, we just signed our soul away. Time to go to hell and get our contract back. And as it turns out, hell is actually pretty easy to get into, so long as you've got a book telling you how to do it and a pouch full of all the ingredients needed for the ritual. Once inside the House of Hope, we meet the titular Hope, who asks us to free her from Raphael's abuse and gives us a nice disguise to meander about the place without getting caught. Bartholomew puts the disguise to work and gains access to Raphael's private boudoir where we meet Harlep, an entertainer who happens to look a lot like Raphael himself. Things get a little bit frisky, but we get cold feet and a fight ends up breaking out instead. It's not a very hard fight even though we start off just a little bit naked, but it does result in pretty much everybody in the house's main floor except for us getting killed, and after the fight we just heal up using the fountains in the boudoir, which gives all the benefits of a long rest. Now that the path is clear, we're free to loot the house, including grabbing our contract. You know, if it's this easy to break a deal with the devil, everyone should do it. We also grab the Amulet of Greater Health, which sets our constitution to 23, massively increasing our max HP and giving us advantage on all constitution saves as well, making Warcaster a little bit redundant, but still this amulet is extremely worth it. Also worth mentioning at this point, we swap over to using Bloodthirst on our main hand and the Knife of the Undermountain King on our offhand, since the changes to Arcane Acuity make wielding Rhapsody a little bit overkill as well. A really big bummer happened here though, and my recording audio ended up breaking, so we'll just have to jam out to the soundtrack for the rest of this video. Either way, we jump down to the basement where we get into a tussle with Hope's guards, but they go down nice and quick, and we free her using the Orphic Hammer before we start heading out of the house. On our way out, the master of the house returns just before we manage to escape, and he is a little less than pleased with all the hijinks that we've been up to, so a fight breaks out. And this fight's got a doozy of a gimmick. Scattered throughout the room is 4 soul pillars, and for each one active, Rafi gets a bonus 1d12 fire damage on all his attacks, and a +3 to all dexterity checks and saves. And he can also use an action to heal from them each turn, while they also give soul charges which fuel his extremely powerful spells. And on top of... Oh my god. No, we're not doing this again, Raphael. No. This is Bartholomew's show. Okay, fine, but keep it in the background. Anyways, we really have to deal with these pillars, but first we gotta deal with these goons, so we start off the fight with an arrow of many targets to boost our spell save DC, and then cast Hypnotic Pattern to disable half the room, including Raphael himself. On Hope's turn, we use her Revoke Guest status ability to guaranteed banish Yurgir out of the fight permanently. And on our next turn, we do a bit of a repeat of the last one, with another arrow of many targets to boost up our arcane acuity before finishing off Corilla, and casting a Hypnotic Pattern to stall the fight a little bit longer, delaying Rafi yet again. The remaining goons blast Hope down pretty low, so on her turn she makes the ultimate sacrifice, stepping into the middle of the room and using Divine Intervention to blast the enemies with a bunch of radiant damage. Unfortunately for her, all the enemies reflect radiant damage. Then we shoot a smoke powder arrow at an enemy which blows up the soul pillar behind them and unfortunately doesn't trigger our Mystic Scoundrel ring for some reason, which we were really counting on. So we down a potion of speed and decide to go for triggering our elixir of bloodlust to max out our action economy. We fire 2 sets of slashing flourishes off at one of the goons, and despite a 95% chance to hit, we miss 2 times. Just not our day. Then this donkey face comes around and disarms us, causing us to drop our bow. Raphael finally gets a turn and blasts us off the screen while dealing tons of damage, and a couple of the other enemies land some more hits too. Things are looking extremely dire for us, so we go full defense mode with a defensive flourish and a blur to make sure nobody can hit us. We also use a thunder wave to try and fling them off the edge, but they've got wings so they just teleport right back up, though we do take out one in the process just from damage. With our remaining action, we heal up and get ready to weather the storm. And with all this prep, we managed to make it to next turn, but now we're even more surrounded, so our last Bardic Inspiration gets used on a defensive flourish and we skedaddle out of the way and cast a Glyph of Warding to take out one of them and chip away at the rest. As it turns out though, this doesn't trigger Elixir of Bloodlust for some reason. We've still got our extra attack though, so we stab one of the goons to finish them off, and while it does trigger our Elixir of Bloodlust, it also bugs out and consumes our bonus action for some reason. Which means we have to run away, throw down a healing potion to top up, and then throw down a speed potion using our last action so we don't lose our next turn. On Raphael's turn, he walks outside the room and casts a spell on us, which we counterspell so we don't have to worry about healing up the next go around. And on our turn, a plan starts to form as this golden opportunity presents itself. This turn though, we just thunder wave most of the enemies away to buy us some breathing room and throw a couple smoke powder bombs at the nearby pillar. Next turn, however, we shut the door, leaving just 2 fiendish fellas in the room with us. Then we use the only scroll of arcane lock we have to seal off the room for 10 whole turns. We use the rest of our turn to finish off the 2 goons locked in here with us and get to destroying the pillars. Once that's done, we down a potion of angelic slumber which knocks us unconscious for 2 turns in return for giving us the benefits of a full long rest. Obviously not something you'd normally use in a fight, but this is not a normal fight. Then we equip Gaunter Mail, the bow we got from the Steel Watcher Titan earlier. Like I said, we can't really use it, but we can use the Celestial Haste ability from it, which is just like a potion of speed, but we don't get lethargic after. We swap out our Bloodlust elixir for an Elixir of Heroism 2 at this point, since Bloodlust is no longer necessary, and once we cast the Celestial Haste on ourselves, the fight resumes. It picks up again with us defensive flourishing and finishing off the remaining Cambion, and stabbing Raphael just a little bit too as a treat. Our devilish host tries his best to Ravaging Inferno us for a few turns while we keep whittling him away, but it really doesn't work out for him as we use counterspell after counterspell. Eventually, our haste is about to run out, so we go for a Hideous Laughter on Raphael, and it actually works. And it doesn't just work, it pretty much takes him out of the fight for the entire rest of it. We go out of the way to finish off the last imp, and then it's not hard to take out Raphael over the course of a few turns with, of course, everyone's favorite Bartholomew hit single, Cloud of Daggers. And just like that, we finished our last major challenge of the run on our very first try, and have freed ourselves from our end of the contract. Now we're off to the Netherbrain, so we can finally be free of it and our tadpole, so we can finally practice in peace before our big concert. We try and destroy it with our cool rock collection, but it doesn't work out, and now the Netherbrain is free, and it's gonna make sure no one ever listens to our music again by destroying the whole city. Thankfully, the Emperor shows up to save the day and whisks us to safety. unthankfully, the Emperor showed up, and he keeps acting like he owns us, so we tell him to bugger off, and he dips to join the Netherbrain as a Bartholomew hater. So we free Orpheus, who turns into a Mind Flayer to help us deal with the losers wrecking the city. Along our way to the Netherbrain, we encounter an army, and slaughter them really quick, and I know, don't worry, it's okay, they didn't listen to our music anyways. Then we climb up the Netherbrain's brainstalk, where we encounter the Emperor once and for all. And he summons this dude who is 100% not our dream visitor. I have no idea who this man is, but I don't like him. Anyways, the fight starts and we get Orpheus to use a Dimension Door scroll to teleport us to the crown and get channeling our cool rocks to create a portal into the psyche of the brain. Then we down a potion of speed to give us an extra action, which we use to summon some groupies as distractions before moving on and casting Globe of Invulnerability to keep us protected while channeling. The plan doesn't work out perfectly, it gets a little bit interrupted, but eventually we get it back on track and the portal opens up. Once it's open, Bartholomew jumps inside and regroups with Orpheus, who casts Fierce Perilous Stakes on us, which gives us 15 extra psychic damage on each hit. We heal 2d8 on each hit too, and we score a crit on a 15 or higher at the cost of becoming vulnerable to all damage for the next 3 turns. So we zip down to melee range and stab the brain with our dagger, giving it vulnerability to piercing, before flying back up with the help of a previously taken potion of flying to get some high ground. And we simply rain down a few slashing flourishes which deal a decent amount of damage, if I do say so myself, weakening the brain enough to decide its fate once and for all. With the brain vulnerable, there's a terrible moment where Bartholomew contemplates using his power to enthrall everyone in the world to become an avid groupie of his. But he decides to earn his fame instead. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a Bartholomew fan after this? Instead, we take out the Elder Brain once and for all, crashing it into the ground, freeing ourselves of our parasite so we can at last practice in peace, and creating, if not the world's most memorable concert, at least its most memorable light show. Goodbye, Bartholomew. Party hard, my dude, wherever you end up. Thank you all so much for watching this doozy of a video of Bartholomew's tour across the Forgotten Realms. Here's the stats for every act for those of you who stuck it out till the end. I really can't thank you all enough. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Look forward to our next run too, which is looking like it's set to be a Lone Wolf monk. Until then, I hope you all have a great day, and a very special thank you to the channel's Storyteller tier members, Bunny Warren and Player 5. I couldn't be here without you guys.